In the frozen chaos of a March night in 1943, a 22-year-old woman lay pinned down on the cracking ice of the Mzha River in Ukraine. German machine gun fire tore through the darkness above her. Water seeped through her uniform as the early spring ice gave way beneath her body. She couldn't see her targets in the blackness, so she did something remarkable. She triangulated the enemy position by sound alone, listening for the rhythm of gunfire and watching for muzzle flashes. Her name was Marie Ljalková, and by dawn she would eliminate a German machine gun nest and kill 5 enemy soldiers. She would become the first Czechoslovak woman ever to participate in combat, one of only 2 female snipers in her nation's entire military during the Second World War. And the piece of shrapnel that would later embed itself in her skull would remain there for 67 years, a permanent reminder of what she sacrificed for a homeland she had never even seen until the final months of the war. This is the story of a Volhynian orphan who became a legend. A woman who defied her own military's gender restrictions, survived some of the bloodiest fighting on the Eastern Front, and finally, at age 90, received her nation's highest military honor. Her journey illuminates a chapter of the Second World War that few outside of the Czech Republic have ever heard about. Marie Petrušáková came into the world on December 3, 1920, in the town of Horodinka. Today this town sits in western Ukraine, but at the time of her birth, it belonged to the Second Polish Republic. She was born into what historians call the Volhynian Czech diaspora, communities of ethnic Czechs who had settled in the region during the 19th century. These families maintained their Czech language and traditions across generations, holding fierce patriotic attachment to a homeland many of them had never actually visited. Her family reflected the complex ethnic mixture of interwar Eastern Europe. Her father was of Ukrainian origin and worked as a clerk at a local sugar factory. Her mother was a Volhynian Czech, and the household spoke both Polish and Czech. This multilingual upbringing would later prove invaluable during Marie's years of military service. She attended elementary school in Horodinka and dreamed of becoming a teacher, having many children, and running a small farm. Tragedy shattered these modest dreams in 1932. Both of Marie's parents died within a short period, leaving 12-year-old Marie and her younger sister Nadiča as orphans. The girls were forced to relocate to the city of Stanislav to live with their aunt. There Marie enrolled in an industrial technical school, but she left after 2 years without completing her studies. She returned to her home village and found work as a tractor driver on a collective farm. It was an unusually masculine occupation for a young woman in that era, perhaps foreshadowing the boundary-breaking military career that lay ahead. Her sister Nadia's marriage would later connect the family to another legendary figure in Czechoslovak military history. Nadia married Josef Beršíček, who would become one of the most decorated Czechoslovak soldiers of the entire war. Beršík was one of only 2 Czechoslovaks awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union. The sisters' fates were intertwined with the most dramatic chapters of their nation's resistance to Nazi occupation. The Munich Agreement of September 1938 transformed Marie's life trajectory. In Stanislavov she met Michał Ljalko, a Rusin from the village of Voloshanka in Subcarpathian Ruthenia, which at that time still belonged to Czechoslovakia. Ljalko was fleeing eastward as the political situation across Central Europe deteriorated. They married, and through this union Marie obtained something precious: Czechoslovak citizenship. This status would later enable her to join the military forces forming to fight for her adopted homeland. When Soviet forces occupied Volhynia following the September 1939 invasion of Poland, Marie and Michał relocated to Ryazan in central Russia. They both found work in a distillery factory, she as a laboratory technician. Following Operation Barbarossa in June 1941, when Nazi Germany attacked the Soviet Union, they were evacuated to Central Asia. There Marie once again found herself driving tractors on collective farms. In January 1942, a Soviet radio broadcast changed everything. The announcement called for Czechoslovak citizens living in the USSR to join a new military unit forming at Buzuluk in Kekalov Oblast. The unit would be commanded by Colonel Ludvík Svoboda, who would later become president of Czechoslovakia. Marie responded immediately to the call. On March 1, 1942, at age 21, She volunteered for the 1st Czechoslovak Independent Field Battalion. She became one of approximately 1,151 women who would serve with Czechoslovak forces on the Eastern Front during the war. The conditions at Buzaluk were harsh. Winter temperatures plunged far below freezing. Equipment was scarce. Uniforms were Soviet issue. Food was basic. But the volunteers trained with fierce determination. They drilled in infantry tactics, weapons handling, and military discipline. They formed the nucleus of what would eventually grow into a substantial fighting force. When Marie arrived at Buzaluk, no legal framework existed for women's military service. Pre-war Czechoslovak legislation did not permit women in the armed forces at all. Commander Svoboda accepted female volunteers on his personal responsibility, initially assigning them to traditional support roles: nursing, cooking, radio operation, and administration. Marie began training for medical service, like most of the women volunteers. Her trajectory changed dramatically during basic weapons training. Captain Ottokar Jarosz, commander of the battalion's 1st company, noticed her exceptional marksmanship during routine exercises. Jarosz, who would posthumously become the first foreigner ever awarded Hero of the Soviet Union, recognized Marie's natural talent. He advocated for her placement in specialized sniper training. From November 11th to December 3rd, 1942, Marie attended the battalion's 1st sniper course. She trained alongside 13 men and 1 other woman, Valentina Binyevska, who was also known as Vanda. The intensive program covered marksmanship, camouflage, observation techniques, and the psychological preparation necessary for the sniper's solitary and morally complex role. The training was demanding. Snipers had to learn patience, above all else. Hours of lying motionless in concealment. The ability to regulate breathing while taking a shot. The mental discipline to wait for the perfect moment, and then act with lethal precision. Marie proved she could handle this burden. Her instructors noted her exceptional steadiness and her ability to remain calm under pressure. Upon graduation, Marie was armed with a Tokarev SVT-40 semi-automatic sniper rifle, fitted with an optical sight. The SVT-40 was a Soviet-designed weapon that offered the advantage of semi-automatic fire, allowing a trained sniper to engage multiple targets more quickly than with a traditional bolt-action rifle. She and Bieniewska became the only 2 female snipers in the entire Czechoslovak military during the Second World War. The Battle of Sokolovo in March 1943 represented the first combat engagement for Czechoslovak forces on the Eastern Front. The village of Sokolovo lay near Kharkiv in Ukraine along the Mzha River, directly in the path of German forces counterattacking after their defeat at Stalingrad. The Czechoslovaks were vastly outnumbered and facing armor they could not match. The Germans attacked with tanks, artillery, and experienced infantry. The Czechoslovaks had little anti-tank capability. What they had was determination, and the knowledge that retreating was not an option. They were fighting their first battle, and the eyes of exiled Czechoslovakia were upon them. Every man and woman in that unit knew that their performance here would define how their nation's contribution to the war would be remembered. Marie was assigned to the 2nd Company, commanded by Lieutenant Jan Kudlich. On March 8th, she established an observation post on a barn roof in the nearby village of Artikovka. From this vantage point, she witnessed the devastating German assault on Captain Jarosz's 1st Company position in Sokolovo itself. Jarosz and many of his men fought to the death that day, refusing to surrender despite overwhelming odds. His heroism would be immortalized in Czechoslovak history, but in that moment Marie could only watch from a distance as her comrades fell. The sounds of that battle would stay with her forever. The thunder of German artillery, the crack of tank guns, the rattle of machine gun fire, the screams of wounded men, smoke rising from burning buildings. And through it all, the Czechoslovaks held their ground. When Jarosz fell, his men continued fighting. It was a slaughter, but it was also a triumph of spirit over hopelessness. The defining moment of her combat career came on the night of March 9th to 10th, 1943. During a counterattack on Sokolovo, Marie advanced with the infantry across the melting ice of the Mzha River. German machine gun fire was murderous. For hours she lay pinned down on the frozen surface, the early spring ice cracking beneath her, water seeping through her uniform. Unable to see her targets in the darkness, She triangulated the enemy machine gun position by sound and muzzle flash. According to her official citation, she eliminated a German machine gun nest and killed 5 enemy automatic riflemen during the assault. Sources vary on the precise count. Some cite 4 to 7 kills during Sokolovo alone. Marie herself acknowledged in later interviews that exact numbers in the chaos of combat could never be certain. What was certain was that she was the only woman sniper to advance in the firing line during the battle. For her actions at Sokolovo, Marie received her first combat decorations: the Czechoslovak War Cross, 1939, and the Soviet Order of the Red Star. She was promoted to private first class. Nazi propaganda in the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia took notice of her, characterizing her based on prisoner interrogations as "Beautiful Marie." It was an attempt to portray the Czechoslovak Soviet forces as exotic or outlandish, but it inadvertently spread her legend across occupied Czechoslovakia. Following Sokolovo, the Czechoslovak forces were reorganized and expanded into the 1st Czechoslovak Independent Brigade at Novochapersk. From November 1943 through spring 1944, Marie participated in fighting for Kiev and the liberation of right bank Ukraine. By summer 1944, her total credited kills reached approximately 30 successful hits. This was a remarkable tally that made her one of the most effective snipers in Czechoslovak service. However, that same summer brought an official policy change that ended her career as a frontline combatant. The Exile Ministry of National Defense ruled that women would no longer be permitted to fight with weapons in the front line. Rather than returning to purely medical duties, Marie transitioned to serving as a sniper instructor in training courses. She passed her hard-won expertise to the next generation of marksmen. She also performed the technical work of sighting rifles for fellow soldiers, calibrating their weapons for accuracy. In summer 1944, Marie was recalled to health and medical courses in Proskurov. She completed training as an ambulance driver and was subsequently assigned as head medic of the 1st Tank Battalion within the 1st Czechoslovak Independent Tank Brigade. Her husband Michal Yalko also served in this brigade. They were about to face one of the bloodiest operations of the entire war. The Carpathian Dukla operation, from September 8 to October 28, 1944, aimed to break through the Carpathian mountain passes into Slovakia. The goal was to link up with the Slovak national uprising, which had begun on August 29. The operation became a charnel house. Of the approximately 14,900 Czechoslovak soldiers who participated, 1,630 were killed and 4,069 were wounded. Casualties approached 40%. Soviet and Romanian losses were far higher still. The terrain was nightmarish for an offensive operation. The Carpathian Mountains rose in forested ridges, cut by deep valleys and narrow passes. German forces had fortified the heights with concrete bunkers, minefields, and interlocking fields of fire. Every meter of advance had to be paid for in blood. The Dukla Pass itself became a symbol of sacrifice, its slopes littered with destroyed tanks and the bodies of fallen soldiers. The weather added to the misery. Autumn rains turned roads to mud, fog obscured targets. The nights grew cold as October approached. Men fought in conditions that would have bloated lesser units. But the Czechoslovaks pressed on, driven by the knowledge that their countrymen in Slovakia were fighting for their lives and waiting for relief that might come too late. During the fighting, Marie suffered severe wounds from an artillery shell explosion. The blast injured her spine, and shrapnel became embedded against her skull bone. Military surgeons decided not to attempt removal of the metal fragment lodged in her head. They judged the risk of the procedure too great. This piece of shrapnel remained with her for the rest of her life, 67 years. A permanent physical reminder of Dukla that would later contribute to her medical discharge and lifelong disability. After recovering from her wounds, Marie returned to service with the Tank Brigade as a medic and ambulance driver. In January 1945, she participated in the Jusel Gorlice operation near the Polish city of Jasło. Then came the moment she had fought for, through years of hardship and bloodshed. During the Moravian Ostrava operation in March and April 1945, Marie Ljalková first set foot on Czech territory. For a woman born in distant Volhynia, who had obtained Czechoslovak citizenship through marriage, who had fought under a Czechoslovak flag for a homeland she had never seen. This was the culmination of everything. The moment was emotional beyond words. She was finally standing on the soil she had bled for. Marie remained with her unit through autumn 1945, assigned to border protection and security duties, as Czechoslovakia reconstituted itself as a nation. The war was over, but her struggles were far from finished. As the post-war settlement took shape, Marie faced a personal crisis. The Soviet Union had annexed Subcarpathian Ruthenia, including her husband Mihal's homeland, incorporating it into the Ukrainian SSR. Mihal wanted to return to his native village, now under Soviet rule. Marie refused. Her words, recorded in later interviews, captured her determination. "I didn't fight for Russia," she said. "I suffered for this country. This is my home. This is where I'll have my grave." The marriage ended in divorce. Marie embarked on a career in the military health service. She served as senior medical staff at military hospitals in Prague, Olomouc, and Brno. On March 1, 1947, she was officially accepted into permanent military service and promoted to officer rank, eventually reaching the rank of first lieutenant. In Brno, she met her third husband, Dr. Volhynian Czech, a military physician. This marriage gave her the surname by which she is most commonly remembered, Lastovecká. The political climate in communist Czechoslovakia proved hostile to many wartime heroes. The communist takeover of February 1948 had transformed Czechoslovakia into a satellite state of the Soviet Union. Political purges followed, targeting real and imagined enemies of the new order. Veterans faced particular suspicion if they had the wrong connections or expressed the wrong opinions. In 1953, Marie was dismissed from the army. The dismissal was attributed partly to political considerations and partly to ongoing health problems stemming from her war wounds. The shrapnel still lodged in her skull continued to cause complications. She received a full disability pension and transitioned to civilian life. For more than 20 years, she worked as a tour guide, guiding Russian-speaking tourists through Czechoslovakia. The irony was bitter. She had fought for this country, bled for it, carried shrapnel in her skull for it, and the country had repaid her with dismissal and marginalization. But Marie was not the type to dwell on injustice. She adapted, she survived, she found meaning in whatever work was available. It was the same resilience that had carried her through the ice of the Mzha River and the inferno of Dukla. The Velvet Revolution of November 1989 brought the end of communist rule. In the immediate aftermath, public sentiment turned hostile toward anything associated with Russia and the Soviet era. Marie found herself insulted on the streets of Brno when overheard speaking Russian. By December 1989, at age 69, she stopped working as a tour guide. The post-communist era also brought belated justice. As part of comprehensive rehabilitation programs for victims of communist-era persecution, Marie's case was reviewed and her military record vindicated. She was promoted to colonel in reserve. She finally achieved the senior rank that her wartime service had merited, but communist-era politics had denied her. In a characteristically defiant gesture, at age 70, she obtained her driver's license for the first time since the war, passing the examination with excellent results. Marie's later years brought the recognition that had been so long delayed. In 2008, she received the Cross of Defense of the State from the Minister of Defense. She attended veterans meetings and was welcomed as a guest of honor at sniper competitions. At one event, she held a sniper rifle again for the first time in decades. The crowning honor came on October 28, 2010. This date, Czechoslovak Independence Day, saw President Václav Klaus award her the Order of the White Lion, second class, military group. It is the Czech Republic's highest military honor, awarded for extraordinary merits for the defense and security of the state and outstanding combat activity. At 90 years old, Marie Ljalková-Lastovecká finally received her nation's ultimate acknowledgement of her extraordinary service. In one of her final interviews, Marie reflected on her philosophy. "I don't pray," she said. "I don't go to church, but I always believed I was under God's protection. I value life, and I'm happy for every day when I wake up in the morning. The world is beautiful." Marie Ljalková-Lastovecká died during the night of November 7 to 8, 2011, in Brno. She was 90 years old. Her funeral was held on November 18th at the Central Cemetery in Brno. High representatives of the Czech Army, Ministry of Defense, and Czechoslovak Legion community attended to pay their respects to one of the last surviving heroes of the Czechoslovak forces on the Eastern Front. Her final resting place is in the columbarium at the cemetery in Malada, now part of Česká Budějovice, niche number 67. She had fulfilled the vows she made when divorcing her first husband. She had her grave in Czechoslovakia, the country for which she had fought and suffered. Of the approximately 1,151 women who served with Czechoslovak forces on the Eastern Front, only 2 crossed the boundary into direct combat. Marie Ljalková-Lastovecká and Vanda Biňevská, both trained as snipers at Buzaluk in late 1942. Biňevská served as a spotter alongside Maria at Sokolovo, where she nearly froze to death on the ice of the Mzha River. She later trained as a paratrooper, joining the 2nd Czechoslovak Independent Airborne Brigade in 1944. Marie's complete roster of military decorations tells the story of both her wartime heroism and her belated post-communist recognition. She received the Czechoslovak War Cross and the Soviet Order of the Red Star for Sokolovo. The Dukla commemorative medal followed later. The Soviet Order of the Patriotic War came in 1985. The Cross of Defense of the State arrived in 2008. And finally, the Order of the White Lion, the nation's highest military honor, was bestowed in 2010. Marie Ljalková-Lastovecká, from Volhynian Orphan to decorated combat veteran to belatedly honored hero, encapsulates the tumultuous 20th century history of Central Europe. She broke barriers that seemed immutable, becoming the first Czechoslovak woman to fight in combat and one of only 2 female snipers in her nation's military. Her story demonstrates the courage of women who defied both enemy fire and their own military's gender restrictions to serve in ways their societies had not imagined possible. The shrapnel from Dukla remained in her skull for 67 years, a physical manifestation of her sacrifice. But Marie bore that burden, and all the others, with a spirit captured in her own words. I value life and I'm happy for every day when I wake up in the morning. The world is beautiful. She lived her final years in the Czech Republic she had fought to liberate. She received her nation's highest military honor, and she was buried in the land she had chosen as her home. When Marie Ljalková lay on that cracking ice at the Mzha River in March 1943, she was fighting for something she had never seen. A country that existed only in the stories of her Volhynian Czech community, in the language her mother spoke, in the identity she had claimed through marriage. She could not have known then that she would one day walk on Czech soil, that she would spend decades living in the nation she was helping to liberate, or that at 90 years old, a president would place around her neck the white lion of Czechoslovakia.